So what we have here, one way or another, is the game imposing narrative through the villains. Pretty much exclusively through the villains, and also Tippy. More on her later. Her memory is slowly starting to come back. But it's a weird kind of admission that, you know, Mario as a character is not someone you can really build a story on. Which is not a concern that has bothered previous Mario games. They had tended to have stories that worked like the Mario platformer games, really, and not be terribly neurotic about it. Obviously, there were little kind of vignettes within each chapter with side characters, but nothing this nothing that's got this ambition, really. Which turned out to be a good decision, because the ambition doesn't come off at all in this game. And we're going to get quite a lot of the story one way or another. But this is a combat heavy chapter, so I'm going to stock up on some items. Particularly since this shop is a lot better than the other one and has Volta Shrooms, although I'm not using any Volta Shrooms this chapter. Do want to make sure I've got a bit more healing though, because I will take a bunch of damage. And before we actually tackle, where am I going? Oh, that's right. The new thing is in Flopside Outskirts, out here. I've gone the wrong way. Now, the heart pillar is actually in this area, but before we do that, there's something else to get. Not that one, that's the next heart pillar. Which is blocked by a conspicuously high wall for no apparent reason. There will be a reason, don't worry. Because what we have here is a stat up, which for a combat chapter will be very helpful. Wrong way again? That sign just says flip, basically. And I got really stuck here on my first recce because I was expecting, with the shape of this opening that I would need the rolling power-up from Thousand Year Door, rather than just using Dotty. Oh, hang on. I don't know why the game's introduced that second larger size of switch. Because they really don't read well in 2D. So we have a bit of extra prophecy about this one, because it says Duel of 100, and I knew immediately what this was going to mean, which I think is probably there as a sort of warning to stock up. And I can totally see how you would need that. Dang it. But we've already stocked up, so there's no need for more stocking up. This is the outskirts. Wrong way. Where I actually want to stop is not here at all. I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to go to this inn because it's more expensive and I'm being miserly. There really is a lot of flipside flopside, but I've explored very little of it. They both have pits of 100 trials, because one of those in a game clearly isn't enough. And there is still no way to skip this elevator. So there's only one more doorway up here, for a total of 7 on this side of the tower, even though there are supposed to be 8 pure hearts. Because the socket for the last pure heart is in flopside. And the people we are fighting in this challenge of 100 trials are called Samagais. Which is it's sort of an interestingly derogatory image of Japanese history, really, that I don't think you would see in the West. Like, I can't think what the... because it's not directly comedic, it's sort of self-appropriative, and I'm not sure what the Western equivalent would be. Something more self-aggrandizing, really. Here's a problem with the character designs, by the way. I know I've seen that guy before, but I cannot remember where. Anyway, we are expected. We use Bowser for this because he does double damage. Also because in most cases what we're actually going to use to win the fights is Flame Breath. And this, because these are Sama guys, this is King Sama. And he's got the pure heart that we need, and he's not going to share it. Unless we defeat 100 of his dudes. Don't worry, we're only going to fight 20 of them. It's still going to take a while. But there are 100 of them in total. And yes, you do fight them all individually. And there is a mode where you can come back and fight all 100 of them. And we do indeed have a lot of fighting to do against the pressing timeline of this world being much closer to being consumed than Flipside. Anyway, all of these guys have their little introductions. And outros. Which is going to get annoying, especially with all the walking across the screen and load screens as well. Bowser, jump. They all have slightly different characteristics. Some of them are fast enough to outrun the Flame Breath and some aren't. Some jump immediately and some don't. Some have spikes on their heads. There are also different weapons. I've not had a fight go on long enough to identify what the different weapons do. But the Flame Breath is powerful. Obviously, spike-headed ones you can't pick up or jump on, so Flame Breath time. I'm not sure that's a haiku. Anyway, this chapter is also padded. I mean, I quite like arena type chapters generally, but the combat in this game is so flat. that it's frustrating, and the encounters are so similar. There we go. Particularly, like, if I didn't have to play it safe because of the endurance aspect, it would be better. And I suppose I don't really have to play it that safe, but the Flame Breath power has not been well thought out. And it's like all the defeat texts are clearly an attempt at humour, but they just end up feeling like nobody's taking anything seriously. They're not really entertaining in any way. But we're halfway through the sequence of actual fights, at least. I made it through 11 fights and only lost 13 health. Which, given that some enemies do 2 damage, is pretty good going, I think. You can tell this is the point where they started running out of ideas for jokes. Because the joke there was just, like, this chapter's really long. And as it happens, it might be the shortest chapter, for reasons that we'll get to shortly. What made the arena chapter so great in Thousand Year Door was that every encounter was different, and in this every encounter is the same. Also, I really don't find mispronunciation jokes funny. I suppose I should be glad just that they actually programmed something in to deal with Bowser's breath, because if they hadn't done that, good grief, this would all be pointless. There we go. So this is the sort of thing that I think works really well in this kind of context, where you go from kind of, there are kind of families within, or little sub-stories within the sequences. Because these can really be used to add character and flesh out a world, if done properly. But also the joke with these guys is just bodies are kind of gross, which doesn't help. Anyway, I think that's 3 left to do. Fortunately, this guy only has reduced HP, because fighting him otherwise would be really annoying. Damn you. There we go. Can you guess what joke another castle is going to make? I didn't actually mean to skip it there, but he makes a your prize is in another castle joke. The large models move so slowly that they're very, very easy to handle. And here we go, here's the last of the, well, the last of the 20 fights in a row. And look who's here. So there's the confirmation then that Bleck is Blumiere from the narration segments between chapters. Who clearly is exacting vengeance for whatever was done to him and Timpani. And now these guys will let us past. But we can at least get a sense of their identities. I keep forgetting that you have to not press up as you go through doors. Open the door, Mario.